Homelander versus Omni-Man is a matchup that's been memed on for the longest due to them being somewhat similar characters but on completely different scales of power. At this point, you, I, and both of our mothers all know that Omni-Man is stomping out Homelander with a pinky, but this has made me wonder, how would Homelander fare against someone weaker than Omni-Man and even Invincible? What would happen if we took possibly the weakest variation of a superhuman with the ability to fly in the Invincible Universe, someone who may be even more similar to Homelander than Omni-Man himself, depending on your perspective? The Immortal. In case you don't know, the Immortal is a character who was a part of the Justice League in the Invincible Universe, and even became the leader of it for a brief period of time. He's mostly known across the community for getting cooked by characters who are much more powerful than him, despite being a somewhat powerful character himself. A nice contrast to Homelander, who's known for bullying the weak. I think it's a pretty good April Fool's matchup. With that said, I'm gonna cut the intro short and get straight into the video. Before we get into anything, I think it's important we lay the ground rules for this matchup due to certain traits that the characters may have. To begin, as you can guess, the Immortal is, well, immortal, but his immortality works in a way where he can still be incapacitated for a decent amount of time. If Homelander manages to defeat Immortal, that's gonna be his win condition. As for Immortal, the same applies, he just has to incapacitate Homelander. They'll also fight in some random city for those who are curious. Now, let's get into what each character can do, how strong they are, and then the matchup itself. Of course, we'll be using Homelander from the show. I normally cross over the continuities like I do for Invincible, but the Homelander from the TV show seems to be a bit more powerful from his original counterpart, and things are actually different in the TV show, unlike the comics for Invincible and the show there. To begin with Homelander, we'll start with his physical strength. Homelander in the TV show has shown himself to be a cut above the rest in almost every attribute. This includes strength. Homelander has outright been said to be able to level entire cities in minutes if he felt the desire to, and this isn't just some extra databook content talk. He goes on to literally say this to Starlight as a threat in the show. Sadly, Homelander doesn't really get too many opportunities to display the absolute limits of his strength and cut loose like Omni-Man and characters from other franchises do, as again, he is the strongest character and he really does care about his image, so he's not going to do anything that can mess it up unless he really has to or he just makes a stupid mistake. So with all things considered, I think placing Homelander at city levels max is a fair assessment, as it lets us take these statements at their word, but we don't hype it up and drag it out since we never really see him do anything close to this. Another thing we can also consider is the fact that Homelander and his father Soldier Boy have relative to equal durability. With Homelander being able to face take an explosion that completely destroyed a nuclear plant, Soldier Boy should be able to do the same. Since Homelander can actually hurt Soldier Boy with his strikes and threaten his life, we could say that Homelander's strikes have more power behind them than that explosion. The nuclear plant certainly isn't the size of a city or anything, but it's just an interesting feat to reinforce Homelander's strength. Homelander is also able to just destroy normal humans with relative ease and probably tear them apart like they're Play-Doh, but that's probably obvious to you guys. Homelander also has some pretty good speed in the context of the boys. He's been able to do things like grab Billy Butcher out of a C4 explosion completely off screen, and has even stated that he was able to break the sound barrier at the age of 8. Homelander is certainly a pretty fast individual and can outspeed everybody and everything in the boys. I would say that at bare minimum he's moving at super to hypersonic speeds, but honestly you can get him a bit higher than this if you include outliers, which I do think is fair given the context of Homelander and his position in the boys. Again, he very rarely has to expend more than half of his overall strength. Homelander's durability is something to be discussed as well. It's high enough to completely ignore all sorts of gunfire as shown in the animation, and it was even said in the show that there isn't any weapon that can be thrown at him and be successful in taking him down. He also did the previously mentioned face tank of an entire explosion that seemed to be the size of a city block, and he's also thrown hands with Soldier Boy who's relative to him in strength, so like his physical strength, I'm going to be placing him at city levels of durability max. Now we're going to skip battle intelligence as Homelander is so mentally weak. I'm going to cover that in his weaknesses. So to get into his abilities, he has access to some pretty decent superpowers. As we all know, Homelander can fly great distances, and it doesn't really seem to exhaust him or cost him anything. He also has access to X-ray vision, super hearing, and enhanced smell. This insinuates that all of his senses are beyond the average person, is not just his strength and speed. Homelander also has a great relationship with heat, as he's able to withstand high amounts of concentrated energy blasts, and has heat vision powerful enough to cut people's heads into two with ease. Compared to most, even including characters in Invincible, Homelander has a huge and wide kit of superpowers. Now, Homelander has a lot of extra abilities and gifts compared to most superhumans in fiction, but this isn't as much of an advantage as it seems when you consider his primary weakness, which is himself. Homelander is so arrogant and used to everything going his way, he's never had to develop any battle intelligence whatsoever. Not only this, he's not a trained combatant and has virtually no hand-to-hand combat skill. Lastly, this arrogance also makes him fairly susceptible to losing his composure in battle. Homelander's arrogance is a very critical flaw that tends to play into almost all of his quote-unquote defeats in the story one way or another, and it should be heavily considered for this video. With Homelander covered, I think it's about time we get to our favorite character in Invincible, the Immortal. In the Invincible Universe, the Immortal is Abraham Lincoln, the man who discovered America, and so much more. He is the guy who's pretty much done it all, including fighting off alien invasions. When it comes to the strength of Immortal, he's often put up against characters who are far stronger than him, such as Omni-Man and Invincible. This allows us to get a pretty decent gauge of his capabilities. As we can see in his battle against Omni-Man, Immortal has pretty high physical strength. He was even able to directly clash with Omni-Man and send Omni-Man himself back with the clash. Although Omni-Man would stomp out Immortal soon after, it's impressive. This is the same Omni-Man who's been able to deflect meteors, level entire civilizations by flying through them, and much more. Being able to combat this same guy is no small feat. Remember, Viltrum sent 3 Viltrumites, each with the ability to conquer entire planets and civilizations just to ensure the success of Omni-Man's capture. The Immortal has also been shown to fight against the Invincible variants for a decent amount of time before being defeated. These variants are relative to Season 3 Mark, but a bit weaker than him, and that's about all we know for their power levels. Immortal himself doesn't really have any crazy feats, but when we consider what he's done to Omni-Man, he's certainly hanging at multi-city levels bare minimum. I wouldn't say that he's on the level of the big boys in Invincible, as we've seen him get wedgied by them once every 4 episodes, but trust me, he's still very powerful. And since we're going to rely on Invincible and Omni-Man to scale Immortal's durability, we're just going to equalize his strength and durability and save time with that. Now, the Immortal has pretty high levels of speed. It's been outright stated that he was traveling at Mach 3 in order to reach Omni-Man during the climax of the season, and we see that he's capable of moving even faster than that, as he's able to battle Omni-Man in direct combat. Keep in mind, Omni-Man is a Viltrumite who's able to travel across galaxies in the span of weeks, and if you don't know, something moving at the speed of light will require thousands of years to cross an entire galaxy. Immortal has also been shown to travel from Earth all the way to space in a few seconds when he was pursuing Alan the alien. As crazy as it sounds, these characters are moving at speeds that are beyond light itself. One last thing about the Immortal that we should consider is his age. As his name suggests, the Immortal is very old and experienced. Even if we take the battle experience that we've only seen on the show, he has experience against many superpowered individuals who are either equal to or above him in strength. He certainly has a pretty good level of battle intelligence and skill, strictly based on his history in the Invincible Universe and the opponents that we've seen him contest. With that, we can conclude the coverage of the Immortal, as he doesn't really have any extra abilities besides his superhuman stats and his ability to fly and regenerate. With both of our subjects covered, let's briefly compare the two and then run the battle simulation. When it comes to the physical strength and durability of both the Immortal and Homelander respectively, Immortal takes both points here. I've said that Immortal hangs around multi-city levels bare minimum due to his ability to throw hands with Omni-Man. On the other hand, Homelander is city level max. Immortal easily takes these two areas. When it comes to speed, Homelander's best feats consist of him moving at speeds that are more than likely capped at Mach 2 with a high ball, whereas Immortal's least impressive speed feats is a statement of him moving at Mach 3, and he peaks at combating a man who can travel across galaxies at multiple times the speed of light. Speed also goes to Immortal. Battle intelligence goes to Immortal, as Homelander has almost no experience combating anybody at his level, let alone someone more powerful than him. And last, abilities. This is something Homelander actually takes, as he can do more than fly, punch hard, and get his head sent flying across the earth like the Immortal can. All in all, Immortal outshines Homelander in everything except abilities, so we have to ask, can Homelander's abilities make much of a difference here? And you know what? Like I always say, I respect the time of both you and I, but with the comparison done, I think we all know that there's no point in even running the simulation as we typically do for these kinds of videos. The Immortal would likely stomp Homelander with minimal difficulty. I think Immortal can fly towards Homelander and Homelander's going to explode. The same way Omni-Man versus Immortal goes is the same way that Immortal is going to destroy Homelander. The gap is that wide, or maybe even wider. So with that said, yes, even the Immortal can defeat Homelander. That's how sorry he is. Thank you guys for indulging in this nonsensical April Fool's video. Can't thank you all enough for the support. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.